And I think a lot of time these lead pastors, they start believing, I built this church. Look, I brought it from 300 people to 30,000 people. You didn't do that, bro. That wasn't you. That was completely on God.
Hey, what's up, Worship Team Training friends and listeners? Thank you so much for downloading and uploading this podcast into your playlist. And it is with great pleasure to introduce, well, we've already had that. Thanks, Sharia, for introducing our co-host, but great to see everybody here today. Tony Guerrero, Rich Kirkpatrick, and Swift Andre Johnson. How you guys doing?
Good.
Awesome.
All at one time.
Rich.
Fantastic.
Hey.
Look, I just want to say, Tony, watch your flipping language this morning. Okay? Watch it.
You saw that.
I did. It's very good text.
My son is very funny.
And so, guys, welcome back to another podcast of another royal waste of your time of great delight. And we have much to talk about today because in the news, of course, you've been watching everything from social media to on cable. Hillsong came out with their documentary on FX. And today we're here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the pride, betrayal, and abuse, all in the name of Jesus. And does this happen in just this one church? No, because this is happening pervasively throughout a lot of churches, more than what we probably would like to think. But we're here to talk about these topics and can't wait to do so as long as I can get my mouth running correctly. So anyway, so the Hillsong documentary, the Hillsong assessment, we're going to do this today. Let's go with you, Rich. What's on your mind about that? Did you see the documentary and what are your thoughts?
I did. They also had another documentary. I don't know who did the last one that was out, but this one having Carl Lentz and his wife interviewed was quite interesting. And out of all the things in there, the thing that really stuck to me was the thing about volunteerism. And how there's these different class of volunteers in the church. These are things, that the people on the outside of organizations don't, we don't know how all things are structured. But it really piqued my interest and triggered some things. So out of all the things that are there, the people messing up is normal. And it's unfortunate and terrible, but that particular systemic thing hit me.
In what way?
Well, just how, I'm just thinking, I used to have 300 volunteers one time, way back in the day, and all the things you would do to recruit and the way guilt was used, the way the system was, being fed by folks volunteering, not always from the best motives, not always encouraging them to do it out of, altruism, but sometimes it was out of, this is the vision. The vision must be fed. And so I don't know, that's too general, but that's kind of triggered some things.
Tony.
Yeah, well, give me a second to get to the Hillsong part of that, because I do want to echo, and I saw that part on the volunteers, but I want to talk briefly on that, only because I just had a conversation yesterday with one of my volunteers that in some way was a little bit pointed the conversation at me, because I'm not practicing right now what I used to preach about practicing as a leader in the church in terms of volunteers. That was a very confusing sentence I just gave you. But I used to find it very troubling that we would expect so much from volunteers that, like, I was at Saddleback Church, which is a very big church, literally thousands of volunteers, and then sometimes many, many services over a weekend. And, there was often I never saw pressure put on anybody, but there was this overwhelming sense like, we've got a lot of work. If you're volunteering here, there's a lot to do, right? And And that's all well and good. And people have to create their own boundaries and are responsible for that. But I would notice how we would work these volunteers, let's say for 6 services on a weekend. And then we as a staff would all take Monday off when these volunteers didn't get to take Monday off. They went right back to their full-time jobs. And so I just found it very important that as a leader who was being paid to be on staff and paid to be there for all these things, that I would also make sure I was volunteering in the church in an area that had nothing to do with my music, with my job. Meaning, if I show up to play at a funeral, well, that's kind of part of my job still. I'm a musician being paid at the church, right? But I made sure I was volunteering for me, it was the apologetics ministry. And so I would teach classes, I would show up and help run these events. And I just made sure that was a separate volunteer thing so that expectation was on me in the same way I put the expectation on my music volunteers. And so I was talking to somebody at my church now about that. And I realized, I've been in this position for not quite a year, but that I haven't quite made that jump yet. I'm still getting my feet wet in the position. But I do think that's very important that when we expect of volunteers, we should be willing to put on ourselves as paid leaders in the church. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that with that section. And Rich, I'm glad you brought it up. But the Hillsong thing, I'm nervous to talk about because it's so easy for us to armchair quarterback these situations, and we can only know the information we're presented with. I don't know any of the behind the scenes stuff other than what's in these documentaries or rumors I've heard and all of that kind of thing. It is very troubling. And like Rich, you kind of said, it's very common. What happened there is very common. It was just so big and and explosive. And the fact that there's documentaries out about it now, in some ways it's good and important because it's cautionary, and it's also unfortunate that it had to get to that place. I had my concerns as somebody watching from the outside about how big that was getting, how famous, how celebrity like the culture seemed to be. And what a shame it went that way. Unfortunately, when I was thinking about our conversation this morning, and I was just thinking about, is that always the case? Let's think about the quote unquote famous pastors who have not had big public moral failures. Of course, we don't know what happens in things we haven't been exposed to, but there's not a lot out of the famous one. I mean, a lot of pastors may have scandals because of stuff they're teaching or whatever, but as far as moral failures, can't think of a whole lot that we're at that level, right? There's Billy Graham, there's Rick Warren, there's some, but boy, as I started going through the list of who are the famous celebrity pastors, or it's troubling how many of them have had some kind of scandal like that. But it's such as Christians, we can understand that that's part of our human condition. We don't go into church saying, I'm a Christian now, we're perfect. We present ourselves that way, and that's a whole other topic. But it's sadly not uncommon. So it's heartbreaking to watch that story. Lot of lessons to be learned in it. And unfortunately, I don't know that we as a church will learn them very well. And I'll just close off with saying that I found myself in watching the interviews with Carl post scandal. Earlier in this, sorry, I'm going on longer than I wanted to, but earlier in the documentary, somebody had mentioned how he would cry at services. And I've always had that thing too, when you see a pastor teach the same message 3 times on a Sunday and they cry at the same part. Is this an act, But I would say it seems like the tears in the post scandal interviews are genuine, and I hope that there's. It seems to be, again, from the outside, that there's real repentance and regret and sorrow. And I found myself, one, sad that the church as a whole, we tend to discard those people and you never hear from them again. But I found myself so interested in that's now a pastor I want to learn from. If all of this is genuine, like I'm really curious now how this man would teach, what he would teach, how he, because all of his stuff has been exposed, how he would teach from that place. And I think that's such a valuable part of the church that gets, again, kind of tossed away, is people who have been broken, people who have come to repentance, people who have been, exposed in that way and remained, gone after God's heart still. I kind of want to hear from them, And so I found myself very curious about that. Like I'd be so curious to go and sit in a service where he was teaching now with all that. So.
Well, I appreciate that perspective. I hold a different opinion. I disagree. I would not want to sit under Carl Lentz and to learn from him. Nor is it my place to judge him. I feel that there has been a lot of damage and there's accountability that must be met. I do agree with you that I think the tears are real when he went back to talking about his abuse as a child, because that was me. I was abused as a child as well. And so I could relate. I related with that one topic I related with. And I can understand the tears were genuine there. But agreed, there's so much hurt that's been happening throughout the church from leaders, but how that causes hurt to church members is even more destructive. So Swift, with your brand new haircut, by the way, we waited for you to arrive 15 minutes fashionably late. So we're glad to see that your haircut's in great shape. So Swift, what's on your mind?
I'm a good, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
By the way, Swift is driving everybody, if you can hear this. So we're not responsible for any accidents. So Swift, please drive safely.
All about Monday morning arm quarterback, and I won't. Just joking. So
it's not working. Either he suddenly got into an accident, bad connection.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It comes and goes.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yes.
All right. So I had a chance to meet Carl Lentz at one of these pastoral meetings with, it was only about eight of us, and we sat down at the table and chopped it up a little bit. When he first walked in, man, he had on like the leather motorcycle jacket, and he had this shirt where it was like hanging down like a blouse almost, and this cross. And I'm like, man, this is a cool dude. But at the same time, I'm like, this guy's a pastor, Mm-hmm. Now, that was just I was saying, hey, he shouldn't dress like anyway. I really don't care. It was just something that ran across my brain. And then kind of how we was having these conversations, how it was like he was ready to go kind of thing. His answers were short and he was getting through there. And, sorry, I'm an hour and 40 minutes late. I can relate to that. I'm late now today. I'm rambling. What I'm trying to say is that possibilities that you get when you get in position like that. And one of the things that really stood out to me like a bad cavity was the volunteer thing. Because I reflect on when my church was growing. I mean, I led worship
for
buddy. 2 years straight. Can you hear me?
Hey, buddy, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Well, I'm going to edit all this out. We may need to wait to do this recording because I want to hear what you have to say, but driving is not helping the connection. And you're going.
I'm gonna pull over. I'm ready to pull over.
You better pull over.
Yeah,
let's see if that's any better.
I was getting to you're crystal clear now.
I want to get
Tony
your story.
frozen.
I want to get your story in the right light, but you got to.
Okay, so just
this is better.
I can see Tony. He froze though. But I'm about to pull over. Okay, that's why I was thinking. Let me get somewhere I can pull over. And
we're waiting again.
And yeah. So anyway, my point I was trying to make was the volunteer aspect of it. I remember volunteering for multiple years. Finally just said, hey, look, I need you to be with the family when we go to church.
I think the volunteer thing is really important because it represents not just the personality issues. Celebrity pastor and all, that's easy target. What's harder, and we don't question this, we do not question the system. We do not question how we view leadership. We've preached for 30 years I've been around a long time. I've sat under all the big guys, met almost half of them at least. Know people who were on the top leadership of Mars Hill, Willow Creek, Saddleback Church, and other places. And the greatest intentions and greatest people, it's not about the people being better or worse or all those things. But I think there is a system that for leadership, we've taught this concept that leadership is everything. Mm-hmm. That, a person who is in that position, whether it's a volunteer leader or whatever. And so it kind of has been, it's important, but it's not everything. Everything does not rise or fall on leadership. I'm sorry, John Maxwell, but I don't believe that. And I think what we've done is we've created this ethos about what we expect out of a leader. We want somebody who is almost psychopathic because the demands on them are not what a normal person should have. And so a lot of that, I think, causes some of the stuff, these behaviors that come out, abuse, so forth, and how people are treated. And so I think we need to question, what is it in the system that we need to rethink about what leadership is in the church and what kind of person can be a leader? I know as a creative person and creative people, we love what you do, but we don't really want you to have a seat at the table. And when I talk to business people and stuff, I'm surprised, having, trying to get a general market book out there. And those people, especially the HR people, are like so excited about for some reason. But when I, talk to my cohorts in ministry, there's not the same kind of questioning about the system. And so I'm not saying, we shouldn't target individuals because, we're all, saints and sinners, as Luther says. But I think the systems we need to question how many years we've preached about leadership and what we see, the Mars Hill, Willow Creek, and whatever the names are, is what we see.
Okay, so I had an opportunity to meet Carl Lentz at a small, intimate, pastoral meeting kind of thing. It was 2014. And he's about an hour and 30 minutes late for the meeting, which I can relate. I understand. No, just kidding. Yeah. But he got there. And what I was saying is it's from appearance, man, I thought, man, this is a really cool dude. But as the conference started to go on a little bit, it was only about 8 of us guys. I don't know if he was really busy or not. I mean, I don't want this to be like the reflection of him now that he's in the media. But what it goes back to is I remember the conversation about volunteering, and that really, really stuck with me because for 2 years straight, I volunteered at my church forever. And my wife finally had to sit me down and say, hey, look, I need you with the family. We need to go to church. Because at the time we had smaller children, and she was volunteering in the kids area. And she got burnt out. I mean, she volunteered for a long time and just could not say no. But it was the fact that no one ever told us to take a break. It was more and more. And now I still lead and volunteer, even though I became full-time in ministry. as a job, I actually I got to see the flip side of that, because I started thinking about, this person is working all day. Then they got to go learn 5 songs, which I have to learn 5 songs too. So I kind of know how that pressure is. Then you got to come to practice ready and prepared, because you don't want to show up to practice not prepared, because that makes your practices long. But then when we would have these, the Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day, and all of these things that happen, and we do those extended services, man, it's grueling. I mean, it really is. Like Tony said, and then on Monday, you got to go back to work, where we get the day off on Monday. And I mean, and that part is really what kind of it didn't make me upset, but I kind of was like, that's crazy. But the responsibilities that we carry when we're in position, like Carl Lentz and many others, there's T.D. Jakes, there's Stephen Furtick, the list goes on and on and on. You have to be careful when you get lifted up on that pedestal, because there's no way around it. Let's be honest. There's no way around you not getting lifted on a pedestal. But it is up to you. You got to figure out the balance between staying grounded and still being at work. It's the work balance play thing, and that human being above reproach, all of those things. You have to figure out that balance. I'm not saying I have the answers to that. But, being a touring artist and taking pictures and signing autographs and all those cool things, I still never really, I always say, this is cool, but I know who I am. And I don't really let that go, oh, I'm the greatest. Yeah. And people, oh, you're so good. I know it's God. And I think a lot of times these lead pastors, they start believing, I built this church. Look, I brought it from 300 people to 30,000 people. You didn't do that, bro. That wasn't you. That was completely on God. So I want to be careful. And I'm not afraid of Hillsong or afraid of any backlash or whatever on social media, but I'm just being real and honest. We as men, we can't help ourselves sometimes. It's our nature. That doesn't give us any excuse, but that's the reality of how things pan out. Like, Tony was mentioning the crying at every service, and that can cry on cue. Man, I know tons of pastors that I've been leading worship with that did it at 5 services every time he got to that one point that he was going to make. And you could see everyone balling up in the audience. And I'm going, like, wow, now I'm confused. Because, man, this dude cried at every service. And so, I don't know, man. It's, I watched the first documentary and on Discovery Channel, and I thought, well, what's going on here? And then when it got to the aspect of the sins of the father and the cover up, and all this is public. This is not anyone's narrative, because if you listen to the guy that started the documentary, he wasn't even there to do that. He started out just going, hey, Hillsong is awesome. I just want to go do some journalism and talk about the church. When he started this thing, he didn't go out there seeking trouble. He just went to go celebrate Hillsong. And then all these things kept popping up because we all have access to like the taxes and all this to any church. And so when he started looking through the books, he kept getting all these red flags on stuff, right? And that's kind of what sparked the controversy of Hillsong.
So
and,
how,
you know, that's a,
sorry, Swift.
there was a rabbit hole. Sorry.
How reflective is that, Tony, when you see you, and this is not every church, by the way, like we've prefaced this before, what you just said, Swift, how reflective is that to a normal church where people go into it thinking that, oh, this is great, this is cool, but then the further they get down that rabbit hole, they see something else. When does that cross the line where it becomes damaging?
Well, first suggest, because of Swift's situation right now, that you mute him, because we're getting all the kickback from his. Okay. Well, I find myself going into churches now after many years. We've all been in ministry many years. I go in with very low expectations, meaning I find myself not blinded by leadership, in the sense that I don't look at pastor so-and-so or elder so-and-so as any different than the lowest guy on the sin totem pole. You know, like we're all there. And I think that's part of I'll put it this way. When I was in a position where I had to hire people at a church, I almost always avoided hiring somebody who came in with the attitude of, oh, I just want to get out of my bad work environment and work in a Christian organization, because I thought there's no way this person's heart is not going to get broken in this job. And that's a shame, but it's the reality, because we are broken people. We are led by broken people. And so to me, it doesn't matter the size of the church. You can have a church of 50 people, and those 49 people will still make that one pastor a celebrity, or that one worship leader a celebrity in their little world. You know, unfortunately, for people like Carl Lentz, it was, you know, hundreds of thousands. And that's the risk when we start putting out those kind of numbers and putting ourselves in that position, and the accountability isn't there like that. That's the risk. But let me go back to, that's why I'm saying I'd be so fascinated to sit under Carl now, because so many pastors, until their sin is found out, they are presenting something. And not just pastors, us too, worship leaders, until we're found out, we present ourselves a certain way to the church.
I see.
What can we learn from somebody who can't hide anything anymore?
Right. Okay.
What can we learn sitting under David? You know, who we know was an adulterer, who we know was a murderer. Like, what could we learn from him, and yet was a man after God's own heart? So I'll just go back to Carl. If Carl now, today, May 24th, 2023, if he is a man after God's own heart, what can we learn from him where he has nothing to hide anymore? And that's where I was going from that. And so that's the problem, is that in any situation, we elevate celebrities, and the bigger the celebrity becomes, even among 50 people, the bigger that celebrity comes, the more it is that person's human nature to hide anything that would detract from, you don't want to be found out because now you're in the public eye. And so our human nature is to keep our sin close to the vest now. We're not going to willingly expose ourselves. We're a celebrity now. Everybody's watching us. It's easier to maybe expose yourself when nobody knows who you are. But the minute people start to know who you are and you're a celebrity to 50 or 100,000 people, you start to hide who we really are. And so that's a big part of the danger. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that's what it struck out in me.
It's also called betrayal and fraud. Rich.
I would say that what we're seeing is possibly because our theology does not allow us to have collective sin.
Yeah, interesting.
We do not allow for us to say we have a problem. We put everything upon a leader we're almost pagan in this way. You know, we know somewhere it's going to get paid for. So, okay, that leader's gone. Things are fine. Now we get a new leader, but the system doesn't change us. And so what I was trying to bring out is we have abusive systems. That's power dynamics are involved in that. And so we're not understanding, and our society's having fights over this because we're not able to say that, you know, collectively, maybe there's things collectively that we have to look as sin too. Not just me as an individual, but I'm a part of a system that is against, you know, God's peace, against his love, against the unity of the church, whatever it is, because it keeps my group in power or whatever it is, or be comfortable, actually, is mostly what it is. It keeps me from being culpable for things that are difficult to solve, like homelessness, just for example, whatever it may be. So when you take that to this situation, like volunteerism or what happened with Hillsong, we have built something that has shielded us for our modern church for 100, 200 years from having these kinds of dialogues. And a lot of people are writing about this now. And for instance, I had a professor, Bible theology professor, explain to me, the group I used to be in was Christian Missionary Alliance. And he explained that they kicked out all millennialists, which means people who weren't premillennial, didn't believe in the rapture. They just believed Jesus was coming. And they told them that you can't be part of our denomination, even though A.B. Simpson founded your denomination, because we don't really believe it gives you enough impetus. It's not as effective in saving people. We can't trust it. So theology sometimes, systems of thinking, we're not allowed to question those a lot of times. And so what we do is we look for a person, or, you know, we're fine without going deeper into what the real issues are. And in this case, like with volunteerism, it's HR, power dynamics. We should know. Carl Lentz, they had a woman in their house intimately involved every single day. That's just not healthy. A married person, that's just not good. And if you do it, like you have an au pair or something, and I know people who've had money to do that, there's certain boundaries that they have for that this didn't have. So it's almost like the wisdom of basic human resource issues that a company is going to basically have. The church still has not embraced. So with volunteers, like what Tony was saying, I did have a church one time I worked for that said, you're required to volunteer like your volunteer hours, what you're asking. And I was required to do that. I thought it was a great thing. And it made me think about, what am I going to ask this guy to do? Of course, but the HR law is I can't volunteer to do music if I'm a musician, because that's not fair, because that's the profession. Then you're not paying, you know, the church is making this kind of unethical power dynamic for me. But say I'm a small group leader or something completely different. That's great. But a lot of places, it's not like that. And you have two classes of volunteers, some who can just show up and they're still celebrated, and they had the perks. So the point here is we have some systems here that, you know, there's no easy answer to it, but are we willing to collectively say that we as a church have a problem with how we view leadership, how we develop our people? And are we willing to look at our structures enough to say, you know, maybe we need to learn how to have empathy, and that in leadership is a good thing? And why does it have to happen in the secular world first when it comes to some of these things about abuse, when it comes to about power dynamics, when it comes to about inclusion and those kinds of things?
So perfect, Rich, Tony, Swift. It seems that as we get our order from 1st and 2nd Timothy about qualifications for pastor, there's much that we hold to those expectations, and yet we don't hold those expectations to ourselves when it comes to the role reversal, simply. And interestingly, we found ourselves here where we're having to discuss such tough issues, but this is the reason why we're bringing this on the podcast. And so we're going to jump more into this next time. So until then, just want to say thank you to our co-hosts, because there's a lot of things that we can go in different directions. And plus, we're without Sharia. And Sharia, as you all know, she's got a lot to say. Until then, Tony, Rich, Swift, thank you, gents, for joining us today.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And guys, we'll see you back here next time on the Worship
Appreciate it.
Podcast. Remember, It's not about being perfect, but about the Lord Jesus to lead you both in life and in worship. See you back next time. Bye.